Cassie, you are live.
I am live.
Yeah.
You're on the internet. I'm on the internet. Should I queue up first?
Up to you. Are they ready?
Are you guys ready?
Yeah, we have another 5 minutes to schedule.
Okay, we'll just wait.
We can do like 2 minutes.
Okay.
Sounds good.
We got
Also,
7
this mic
people.
does come off because I know that I'm not going to stand at the podium because otherwise I will trip over and fall over. So the mic can also do this.
Oh my god.
Right now.
Also, guys, just so you know, I'm gonna Professor Owens. She's gonna go 2 minutes.
We should do
Yes.
And then I'll do this.
It's already queued up. I just need to swap it over.
Y'all ready? Hi, beautiful people! Welcome to the Black Feminist Thought Symposium. I'm one of your MCs today. My name is Anna. I use they and she pronouns. I am so excited to be here today. There are so many amazing scholars, brilliant students in the space. And we have our fearless educator-in-chief here, Dr. Tammy Owens. Professor Owens, if you'd like to come up here and give our little introduction, we will do that.
This is so exciting. Thank you so much, Anna. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here today. I am so excited to have the privilege of welcoming you to this amazing Black Feminist Thought Symposium. I am the professor, as Anna mentioned, Dr. Tammy Owens, but please make no mistake, all I did was offer the student scholars theoretical tools. Everything that you see here is the genius work of the students. From the setup of the symposium days and the beautiful program in your hands, to the advertisements on social media, to like the advertisements around campus that you may have brought you here today. This was all done by brilliant scholars in this class. And borrowing from their symposium theme, which is paving our own paths through an analysis of time, this symposium and the level of genius that you will witness today as they present their research took time. Because this scholarly work took real time, it is important that I let you know that we chose to break some of the rules of academia together. First, we decided together that since everyone put in the time to make this symposium happen, we would not adhere to common academia symposium protocol of having only one keynote speaker. Everyone is a star. Thus, everyone is a keynote speaker, and everyone's genius deserves the time to shine equally, beautifully, and radically. The second rule that we decided to break together was the mind-body split. We decided to use this time to be human. This means that unlike other academic symposiums and conferences, from time to time, you will hear us cheer for our fellow scholars and their research. You'll see us dance, clap, and hug. You may even see us shed a tear of joy or two. And if by chance during our celebrations you are wondering what is really going on here, just know that it's simply our time. It's our time to celebrate that we survived and that we are here together, armed with brilliant ideas and theories that we dare to believe will keep us free. Because we know that the time will come when we'll have to look at each other and say, see you next time. Again, thank you so much for being here. Enjoy.
Thank you, Dr. Owens, for that beautiful introduction. I don't know about you guys, I had chills the whole time. Let's get some more energy going in this room so that the people outside know what they're missing. Can we get some more cheers? For those of you outside, this is the Black Feminist Thought Symposium. You are missing out. The presentations, as we all know, will be 10 minutes, and that is a tight 10 minutes because we want to make sure everyone has time. Cassie will be holding up some nice papers that say 5 minutes left. 2 minutes left. Please show us, Cassie. Ooh.
Wait, hold on.
So please keep an eye on this direction to make sure you know you're on time. But also, please do what you need to get your presentation done on your terms. Up first, we will have an amazing scholar, somebody who I personally respect so much for their wisdom and all of their brilliant contributions to class, Aria Grayson.
All right. So my name is Aria Jackson. I use clicker. Wait, let me make sure I know how to do this. I don't.
It's down.
It's down.
Nice.
Have it all figured out. All right. My name is Aria Gratson. I use she, her pronouns, and I want to start by again thanking everyone for coming here today and everyone on the live stream. Now, this presentation will include depictions of police brutality and extreme violence, so please take care of yourself however they may look. John, Africa. Rhonda, Africa. Teresa, Africa. Frank, Africa. Conrad, Africa. Raymond, Africa. Tree, Africa. Delisha, Africa. Netta, Africa. Phil, Africa. And Tommaso, Africa. These are the 11 people who were brutally murdered on May 13th, 1985. These are the 11 lives who were lost when the Philadelphia government decided to bomb its own citizens. This is the rigidity of moves remembrance, finding movement in a stagnant narrative, and these are their stories. Now, the MOVE organization was first formed in the early 1970s under the teachings of John Africa. They are a naturalist, self-reliant, anti-military group. And although they do not self-identify as a Black liberation organization, it is a title they have fully embraced, and their membership is comprised of mostly Black members. Now, MOVE may not self-identify as a racial organization, but the perception of it as one is crucial to understanding the events that unfolded. Now, from the beginning, the MOVE organization was at odds with local law enforcement. As an anti-establishment group, they would frequently protest, and this was met with extreme police response. Now, the brutality that was demonstrated here cannot be overstated. In the mid-1970s, a few MOVE members moved to a house in Powelton Village where they set out. Now, they immediately met resistance from the neighbors. They would not take care of their garbage and were seen as filthy. And when they would broadcast their ideologies it was seen as disruptive. Now, throughout the 1970s, MOVE continuously had conflict with Philadelphia and its people. In fact, the Philadelphia government proclaimed at one point that MOVE was the biggest threat to the city's well-being. In 1978, a shootout occurred between MOVE and the police, and one police officer was killed. Now, for this one death, 9 MOVE members were sentenced. Later reports do debate if it may have been friendly fire. Following the sentencing of the MOVE 9, the organization relocated to Osage Avenue with a new sense of urgency. This presented an uptick in their broadcasts, and with this became increasing uses of obscenities as well as mentions of threats. Now, this came to a head in 1985, and on May 13th, the police showed up at the MOVE house and demanded their surrender. When MOVE refused and did not give over their children, the violence began. The police started by hosing down the MOVE house and throwing in tear gas. Then came the bullets, and then the bomb. The fire that was ignited from the impact was monumental, but the department was told to let it burn as a tactical weapon. By the time they intervened, it was much too late, and West Philadelphia was charred. Out of the 13 members that lived in the house, 2 survived. Later, the house was searched, and 5 guns were found on the premise. Quite the threat. What I've presented to you so far is the dominant narrative that surrounds MOVE. Now, this narrative is flattening. It begins by mentioning John Africa, throw in a little something about the conflict, and end with the bombing. What this allows, this simplification, is blame to be placed, and blame is the only way that the story can make sense. Now, sure, it's a tragedy, but if MOVE deserved it, it's a lot easier to stomach. Tragedy is not digestible. This story is not justifiable. Yes, the MOVE organization had extremist policies. They had problematic beliefs. That does not justify what happened, and that is not why it happened. The narrative that surrounds MOVE is so baked in that to get around it, an alternate approach must be used entirely. Now, by focusing on direct interviews and archival documents, this general idea of homogenization can be shaken up and a true understanding can be held. So, often the story ends after the bombing. Obviously, this is not the case. After Philadelphia dropped a bomb on its own citizens, the city was in shambles. Over 60 homes were destroyed in the fire, and over 250 people were displaced. Now, it took until 1986 for the bombing to make it to the courthouse. But the person who was on trial was Ramona Africa, the sole survivor of the MOVE bombing. Now, they didn't accuse her of dropping the bomb, but they did accuse her of making them do it. Ramona faced charges of violence, inciting riot, and general subordination. For a month, Ramona was ridiculed and dehumanized. Now, Ramona Africa is the perfect scapegoat for this scenario, and her identity as a Black woman is evident when looking at the court documents. She's described as filthy, unkempt, referencing her locks. She refused to wear form-fitting clothes, and they refer to her as no better than a man. Throughout the trial, she's consistently told that she is too emotional, too angry, too Black. Now, the police commissioner was not at this trial, despite Ramona's request for him to be there and as a witness, as it was considered to be too volatile, too emotional, both for the city and for the commissioner. Is it not too volatile to have a woman who has had a bomb dropped on her insulted for a month straight? Ramona stood covered in burns while the jury demeaned her. Now, when you hear about a MOVE court case, if you Google it, what'll show up is the 1992 case where Ramona did sue Philadelphia, and they admitted they might have made a mistake by dropping a bomb on this civilian house. What is not included is the fact that Ramona Africa spent 7 years in prison for being bombed. Ramona Africa was blamed for the death of her family. Now, Ramona's story is not the only one that is not covered. Following the MOVE bombing, instead of sending forensics the Philadelphia government sent a construction crew, and the bodies were lifted by crane. Dead children's limbs were mixed in with rubble and taken in a crane. When they finally made it to the coroner's office, they left the remains at room temperature. Their autopsies were an instant. They had no coverage, and two bodies, the bodies of two little girls, were sent to the University of Pennsylvania Museum to be kept alongside the slave exhibit. It took until recent years for those to be returned. Now, these instances of oppression are not shown because of whose stories they are. The story of Black women, it's never shared. And that is why these women have not gotten justice, is because of their identity. In 1985, the first coverage of MOVE said that perhaps some of the deaths were caused by fire when the people tried to flee the house. Or perhaps they were caused by the police shooting them as they ran for their lives. Nobody talks about this. Now, these narratives are the ones that need to be told. What is interesting is Black women are mentioned in the context of MOVE, but when they are mentioned, it is to explain what happened. Suddenly, the Philadelphia government cares about Black women, and it's enough to drop a bomb. The bomb was not dropped for anyone, and it definitely wasn't dropped for Black women. If the government cared about these women, they wouldn't have put them on trial. They wouldn't have treated their bones as lumber. They wouldn't have stolen the remains from their loving families and refused to return them. This is a story of erasure. And the reason this erasure occurred was the identity of the MOVE members. The Philadelphia government has said point blank that they would have not reacted the same way they did if it was a white organization. Now, in the wake of this memory, we can follow this stagnant narrative, or we can make a new story. A story for John, Rhonda, Teresa, Frank, Conrad, Raymond, Tree, Delisha, Netta, Phil, Tommaso, and importantly, for Ramona. Thank you.
I'm sure you could hear how much everyone loved Aria's presentation. Thank you so much for presenting. Our next presenter is Anne Colant with Pain Practice. Okay.
Thank you.
Wait, I just want to make sure. Okay.
My name is Anne. Thank you for being here today. And thank you, Aria, for that amazing presentation. I live near the Philadelphia area, so I know about MOVE, and that's really informative. So I'm a senior, and I'm graduating soon. I'm a biology major, and this is kind of why I picked this topic. I'm looking at medical disparities that Black women face and alternatives that they can take. The title of my topic is From Pain to Praxis, the Black feminist practice of fetal maternity care. And I wanted to explore alternatives from the dominant healthcare systems we have today that constantly overshadow and undermine Black women. And my research question was, how exactly does the Black feminist tradition of communal care improve maternal health outcomes for Black women in contrast to the dominant medical system, shaped by racist ideals? And I picked a specific organization that I'll get into later and focus on kind of the policies and something they're doing for pre and postpartum needs for Black women. So beginning with the context and introduction of why I picked this, it's kind of no mystery that our current healthcare has failed Black women. And every year, 700 Black women die in the United States due to pregnancy complications and inadequate care. So this is a system that was built upon the exploitation of Black women's bodies for medical research. And as we learned about in class earlier on, in 1845, Dr. J. Marion Sims developed these surgical techniques through unethical medical experiments on enslaved women, Anarcha, Lucy, and Betsy. And on the right, I just wanted to highlight those three women. And these were done, his experiments were done without anesthesia due to the racist belief back then that Black people felt less pain than white people. And then years later, in 1907, we learned about the American eugenics movement, which was the forced sterilization of Black women to uphold white supremacy. And then in 1951, Henrietta Lacks, who was a Black woman suffering from cervical cancer, had her cells genetically taken from her without her consent. And all of these Black women were used for their bodies and used to further scientific research and stuff that was found, but they were never credited. Henrietta's family didn't know they were her cells until 30 years later, so they kind of had no idea that was going on, and she never got credited. So, to research alternatives for the methods, so to understand misogyny in healthcare, I focus on some texts from our class that we went over. One of them being Racism, Birth Control, and Reproductive Rights by Angela Davis. But for my main examination, I focused on the organization, the Black Lives Matter Alliance, aka BMMA, and looked at their website and took notes on the policy agenda and things they're doing to support Black women. And many of the themes and policies align with the stuff we learned in class for Black Feminist Thought. And also another thing I did for methods was watch interviews of their executive director and also live streams online. So the first key finding I have is they offer, Black Lives Matter Alliance offers a multidisciplinary community of workers, which is comprised of midwives, physicians, nurses, doulas, lactation support providers, and many more. And I took this quote from their policy online. Black maternal, reproductive, and perinatal workers are uniquely positioned to provide holistic, culturally congruent care in community settings to Black women in need. So their use of the midwives and doulas is rooted in the African tradition of kind of like where it came from, and a midwife is a trained medical professional who helps deliver babies, while the doula is someone who is kind of like for emotional support and provides comfort and kind of like mental health to the Black mothers. And so I thought this was really important because like what we see today in our medical field for like gynecology, healthcare, stuff like that, midwives and doulas were replaced. And there was actually a campaign about them years ago that kind of required like a strict license in order to help deliver the babies and strict education, so we don't see them around as much. And this is a alternative practice that centers community-based care for Black women and connects our class and themes of Black Feminist Thought by enacting as a form of reproductive justice and subverting the dominant medical systems of our current practice. And for the next key finding I have, as I was reading through their policies, I was really inspired by their attitudes towards all pregnant people. And they ensure that they all have the rights, respect, and resources to thrive before and after pregnancy. And then the quote I took from this section was, "The term Black Mamas represents the full diversity of our lived experiences that includes birthing persons. Cis Black women, trans folks, and gender-expansive individuals that are people of African descent." And so I wanted to connect this quote to Kimberly Crenshaw's term intersectionality and highlighting Black women, the components of race, class, and gender. And another reason why I included the quote was because it represents all of the gender expressions by using the term broken people. It highlights queer, trans, Black people, and I just thought that was really inspiring. So to conclude, another reason kind of why I focused on this organization topic is because our current political climate today and the restrictive policies on healthcare are severely hurting Black women. And I focused on the Black Lives Matter Alliance and their framework because I think their style of care and practice is needed more than ever now. And their gender inclusivity and connections with midwives and doulas is a critical healing practice that serves as a form of resistance for Black women. And then understanding the racist history of our dominant healthcare systems demands interrogation, and we need alternative practices more than ever. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Em. That was so interesting. I'm so inspired by BMA. And it was really, really beautiful to see how you connected this topic to your major and your other studies. Next up, we will have the Cassie Handler with her presentation. Please give it up for Cassie.
Sorry, one second. Alright. For some reason it was doing a weird laggy thing. So I had an allergic reaction this morning, so if my voice gives out, that's fine. Alright, so hi. I'm Cassie. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a junior American Studies major, and I'm here to talk about kind of Star Trek as a very flawed version of a racially utopian society. So basically, I'm going to be talking about Star Trek: The Next Generation. I'm going to be talking about Star Trek: The Next Generation and also killing flies. Just the next gen part. So basically, the next Star Trek Next Gen started airing in 1987, which is different from the original, which started in 1966. And it had a much different tone than the original show. The problems are a lot more intellectual and kind of, and like there was a lot of like more like let's solve this with diplomacy rather than just going on and shooting places up with laser guns, which isn't there's nothing inherently wrong with that, but there's it's sometimes it's nice to have a little tone shit, and so kind of it featured. It elaborated and also at the same time reinforced the problems that the original show had, which is something I'm going to talk about more on the next slide. Okay, so the good and bad and ugly, if you want to call it that, of Star Trek: Next Generation. So the good part is that it had a much more diverse cast, more intellectual problems that were still a bit reinforcing imperialist ideals, but a little bit less so. And the cast had a very diverse chemistry, not just diversity in terms of casting, but also kind of in relationship to each other. And they were also a show that normalized interracial couples without making it the center of the show. They were just like, this is happening. We're not going to talk about it. This is not what the show's about, but this is happening. And shows today even don't do this, and are still weird about that kind of thing. So I give it that. So the bad parts are still a lot of sexism and a lot of objectification of female characters. Such things as very, very high miniskirts that are just part of the uniform sometimes. And it's like, okay, this is not, there's a difference between professionalism and that. And also kind of, there would be unnecessarily tight bodysuits on just female characters. And this is a problem that the original show had and this show, and I think a few shows after that as well. So it's also just kind of a Star Trek problem. But also, more specifically, what I'm going to be talking about is how this show continues the kind of problematic stereotypes and specifically racial stereotypes that the original show encouraged. So kind of the character I'm going to be talking about mostly is a character called Gaiden. She is the bartender of the bar that's on the Starship Enterprise, which is called 10 Forward. She, in addition to being a bartender, she's also sort of like a ship's counselor, even though there is an actual ship's counselor. She's just not very good at her job. And so, like, she helps people with, like, anything from, like, relationship problems to, like, the captain and diplomacy. And this is all played by a very young Whoopi Goldberg. It's ambiguous whether or not she's immortal, but she's not human. She is a species that lives an extra long time, and something I'll dive into her background a little bit later is the fact that she witnessed a bunch of parts of Earth history because she was hiding from her father on Earth for centuries. So basically, more specifically, to kind of elaborate on kind of Gaiden and why I chose her and connected her to Black Feminist Thought is that she kind of is like a futuristic version of the mammy stereotype. In the fact that, one, she wears a headdress, which is apparently just kind of her species thing, but also when they go back in time and see her, she's not wearing the headdress, so she doesn't need to be wearing it. It's not like part of her her species culture or anything. So she's somewhat of a caretaker for everyone on the ship, and she's like a very much respected member of the crew, but not respected enough to actually have a role on the permanent cast. She just kind of pops up sometimes in various episodes throughout all 7 years that Star Trek Next Gen ran, from 87 to 94, I believe 94, yep, and so she's like just expected to fulfill this role because of her seemingly centuries of wisdom, but it's kind of just, thank you, but it's kind of just like she doesn't, like she's not given a rank, like she still doesn't have a job, and kind of venturing on to kind of talk about, these are the types of sources I consulted, and then I'll go back to what I mentioned earlier. So the show itself on the streaming service, Paramount Plus, the only reason why I keep my Paramount Plus subscription, academic journals and secondary sources, and a new article in Skidmore News about what people, more specifically Skidmore students, thought of the show, more closer to its initial release, and fandom sites where all random knowledge about specific characters is found. So kind of final thoughts to think about is I was thinking of, these are just, you can just answer these questions to yourself in your head. But so I was also kind of thinking about the culture of toxic masculinity and sci-fi, thinking about the head of Scientology was initially a sci-fi writer, and kind of thinking about men, specifically male fans, talking about DEI hires in sci-fi, and also I was thinking about more specifically the Star Trek universe, because the fact that Gaiden is a service worker on a ship everything is automated, like the drink machine is automated, like everything is automated. So why are there service workers in a world where this has seemingly been, the need for service workers has been negated due to artificial intelligence? So it's is that really, is it really a utopia if you're just still banking on the servitude of Black women? And why is it that this utopian society has seemingly liberated everyone, but is also still relying on the servitude of Black women, like Gaiden, even though she's a supernatural alien, which we can get, which I could write a whole presentation about that as well, but I'm not going to because I don't have time. Kind of in conclusion, I just think it's I still like Star Trek. I'm still a fan of this show, but I do think it's important to notice the ways in which it falls short, and also the way in which it excels. And I'm gonna put up another sugary slide because I like these things. They're fun. So if you have any questions, you can email me. My email is there. This is just my dead name. I'm not Irish. And last this is another question slide that sparkles too. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kathy, for such an insightful and thoughtful presentation. We built in a little break if you want a water break or go to the bathroom, or also we have lemonade and cake in the back if you want to go get some. We'll come back and reconvene for dinner at 1:30.
Awesome.
So,
Thank you.
Yeah, it looks like the transitions. Yeah, they're playing. It is on the play though. I don't know if you see it. Okay. It ends up being a minute. Do you want to resend it to me? What do you think? You can share it with me on Canva. Yeah, I wouldn't download it. Just send me it. I can click it. So you can just send it to me. What? Yeah. Okay.
I hope everyone enjoyed the soup cakes and took a little break. Next up, we have Charlotte here talking about rooted resilience and the municipal traditions.
Yes. Outfit.
Outfit C, presentation C.
I had an issue with my slide video, so I'm just gonna keep replaying this. It should not take extensive research to understand.
You need alternate.
Yeah. Woo! It should not take extensive research to understand what your ancestors ate. For many global cuisines today, this was information that was passed down through generations, and for some, it's as easy as walking into a restaurant. So what happens when there's a calculated effort to stop that? Hi everyone, I'm Chandler Greer, and in my paper, Rooted in Resilience, the erasure and reclamation of Black and Indigenous culinary traditions, I explore the parallel attempts at erasure that Black and Indigenous foodways endured, the negative effects in those communities as a result, and the fight for food sovereignty as a tool of social justice, the eco-womanist practices and principles that underlie the importance of embracing culinary tradition. There's a long history. The US government trying to separate Black and Native American communities. The government specifically would not recognize Black people as part of the tribal nation, and so highlighting the similarities is something that's really important because it's affected my family specifically. As a Black and Indigenous cook from a large Southern family, food has always been an important part of my life, and I started really and seriously examining the food that I was eating from a social justice lens about 6 years ago when I decided to stop eating animal products. And that brought me closer to the recipes that I grew up with because I had to adapt them. In researching my ancestors' diets, one of my key arguments is that people tend to gloss over the West African origins of soul food and fail to consider that enslaved people had more access to vegetables and often weren't given large cuts of meat. And so a lot of soul food traditions started with very vegetable-centric dishes, and that's the same with traditional Indigenous pre-colonial food. And to illustrate that, a lot of pre-colonial Indigenous foods completely excluded dairy because it's something that just wasn't available to them. And similarly with Black people, which has resulted in about 80% of both Black and Indigenous populations being completely lactose intolerant. Additionally, the regenerative farming practices and zero-waste principles that Native peoples pioneered in North America are completely antithetical to concepts like modern factory farming. Forced isolation from their ancestral food systems, but also the wider US food system has dealt outsized damages to the Black and Indigenous communities, primarily with regard to health outcomes. According to the Department of Health and Human Services of Minority Health, Indigenous people are 1.5 times more likely to contract diabetes, and Black people are 1.4 times more likely. And children in these communities are less likely to receive education about healthy eating practices in general, but including from their primary care physicians. Historical oppression created the inequitable food environments that we call food deserts or food swamps, which are slightly different because unlike in food deserts, food swamps do have some sort of access to healthy whole foods, but the communities have been inundated with ultra-processed alternatives. According to the NIH, Black people are most likely in the United States to live in these environments. And in that same vein, the reservation system created what are often the same environments for Indigenous peoples. In fact, the maps of reservations and food deserts, as well as the maps of where most Black people in the country live,
overlap if you sort of put them over top of each other. And additionally, Black and Native American people are more likely to live below the poverty line, which further restricts their access to healthy eating choices. The problems these communities face and have faced in a culinary sense are a result of their removal from their ancestral lands. And even though some Native American tribes were nomadic, many were not, and those who were moved back and forth between 2 or 3 different regions, and so the removal really dealt a huge blow to their culinary traditions. Many tribes were sent to parts of the country that were completely unfamiliar to them. Native people have never been given any real food choices. As time progressed, people were either taken from their families for assimilation purposes, fed dishes in the haunting halls of Native boarding schools that didn't bear any resemblance to what they were used to, or they were given food rations on reservations because their farming practices were destroyed. This left large swaths of these communities malnourished. The commodity food program, introduced in the 70s, has been problematic and has led to the emergence of a sort of native soul food movement in retaliation. Likewise, enslaved people who were removed from their homeland and brought to plantations were given scraps to eat, and rooted in ingenuity born out of limited options and the need to adapt their cooking techniques and ingredients, they created dishes using what was available to them, thus creating Black American soul food. Because of the racist neighborhood and district organization practices, the US government aided in pushing Black people into underfunded areas without access to healthy food options. Efforts to reclaim food practices illustrate a divestment from history from a version of history that was used to attempt cultural genocide, and in some ways, an actual genocide. A version that tried to portray my people as those without culture or an inferior culture as a means to justify stripping them of their humanity. Like my ancestors who created soul food as a means of retaliation, embracing aspects of historical foodways is an act of rebellion. In my research, I covered interviews from Indigenous chefs like Sean Sherman, who goes by the sous chef, which is sort of a play on words between his tribe, and I thought that was really fun, which does not use ingredients like wheat, flour, cane sugar, dairy in his restaurant Awamni, which his tribe would not have been familiar with prior to colonialization, which he describes as presenting a decolonized eating environment. He not only helps to educate Indigenous people on their tribal foodways, but in the process, curbs the rates of health issues that the Native population has endured. Black women run restaurants like Cadence and the Funny Vegan chain aim to reframe soul food and Black comfort food for a world where we get to choose if we want to take part in the oppression of others when we decide what goes on our plates, in a category of cuisine designed to be a liberator. It's important to note that Awami's menu is also 50% plant-based. I also looked at the work of soul food chef and historian Adrian E. Miller, who stated that people look at him strange when he mentions the sort of emerging craze of vegan soul food, but he actually sees it not as an oxymoron, but as a homecoming, because people often tend to overlook the many plant-centric dishes that sort of shaped the history of American soul food. A statement like that is so important to me because a lot of things influence my eating habits, but one of the most important things that I view as a proponent of that is that I view veganism as a stance against oppression. And I learned through autoethnographic self-reflective data that better understanding how my ancestors ate changed the way that I view culinary history in general. A theory that I examined heavily for my paper was eco-womanism, coined by Melanie L. Harris, which argues for an environmental protection, and environmental justice through looking at it from a spiritual and social justice lens. She argues that Black women in particular have an innate tie to the earth, which I think is an important connective framework as a Black and Indigenous vegan and cook. And the reason why I went vegan was initially because I'm an environmentalist. And even though I'm not religious or particularly spiritual, connections like that are what shapes the indigenous people's connection to the land. And in West Africa, tribal connection to the land also shaped the way that enslaved peoples later interacted with the earth. The American food system was not built for my people. For Black and Indigenous people, rejecting the standard American diet isn't just a health decision. Learning about and prioritizing our ancestral eating habits for many isn't even a choice they can make or one that they're aware of. Historically, the food we eat and the surrounding choices tell our stories. They tell the story of how we utilize the land around us, the animals in our care, our activities, the deities we worshipped, what our homes look like, the other groups that we interacted with or lack thereof, health markers, what we would do during community gatherings, and I know I mentioned a lot, but there's so much more. For my people, this rich tapestry of information has been destroyed, and in many ways has led to cultural erosion. Despite the heritage embedded in Black soul food and Indigenous iterations, the history of their emergence underscores the displacement, dispossession, and erasure these communities have endured, with food serving as a potent symbol of resistance. So I leave you with this. If food tells the story of who we are, who gets to write that story? What happens when generations are denied the ability to preserve or even access their own traditions? What does it mean to reclaim your history through a recipe, a seed, a plate? The erasure of Indigenous and Black foodways was never just about what's on the table. It's about severing connections to the land. We're tied to the land we inhabit because it means leaving your mark. It means leaving your presence. And despite people trying to destroy that mark, we take parts of that with us. Thank you.
That was amazing. Thank you. It's especially inspiring knowing your personal project with Teeny Bite Bakery. Follow her on Instagram too. Another embodied practice we love to see. Next up, we'll have our finishing speaker for this Revisiting the Past day of the Black Feminist Thought Symposium with Elise Burton.
Okay. Hi, everyone.
Hi.
My name is Elise. I use they, them pronouns, and I'm an American Studies major. And as an American Studies major, I take a lot of classes about American history. And when you're doing any sort of historical process, especially a research process, you're usually asked to find a primary source or two. The issue with this is, what do you do if you're writing about a group of people that you can't find primary sources about because they've been historically and systematically excluded from the very institutions that store information? This is especially the case with Black women. So with this project, I wanted to focus on how Black women, when faced with exclusionary preservation and record-keeping institutions, formulate their own alternative ways to preserve their own history. So just to give you a little bit of background and context for why it is that libraries and archives are so exclusionary, we have to look at the formation of libraries themselves. So the first public library in the US is generally considered to be the Library Company of Philadelphia, which was founded in 1791 by Benjamin Franklin. And while there is no, within their charter, there is no explicit writing that excludes Black members from the library, we can see that up to 1881, there were no Black members in their library, despite the fact that we know Philadelphia had a huge and fairly affluent free Black community. We also know that in 1833, the Library Company of Colored People in Philadelphia was founded. So we can see from the very formation of public libraries that they were kind of inherently segregated by race. If you've ever been to a public library and you've checked out a book and you've seen the really, really long list of numbers and decimals on the spine of the book,
That is the Dewey Decimal System, and that is how most public libraries classify and categorize the books stored within them. The Dewey Decimal System is the most standardized form of organizing libraries. It's used in over 200,000 libraries within the US alone, and is used in over 135 countries. The problem with this is that it's also kind of inherently exclusionary. And so to illustrate that, I have this quote from Dorothy Porter, who was the librarian at Howard University for over 40 years. And when she started working at Howard in their libraries, she came across this issue of how is she supposed to provide information for Black students at this Black university when every single thing written about Black students and Black people are categorized into one of two categories: slavery or colonization. So again, we see that most libraries are kind of built to systemically exclude Black people. So how do Black women circumvent this? And they do this through alternative means of preserving their history. So records housed in white institutions, as I've said, obscure more than they preserve. When we think about who's in charge of the record storage, who's creating the records being stored, and whose stories are being centered, we realize that it is white men. So Black women turn to storing their own histories. One of the ways they do this is through naming conventions. A lot of times they name their children after ancestors. So we may not have a paper trail of these people existing. We do have like a matrilineal line preserving and making sure that these women do exist, and we know they exist because of their legacy through their children and their grandchildren. Dr. Tiara Tanksley writes in Towards a Method of Black Feminist Archival Bricolage. She writes about her grandmother, who was the only person in her family who knew how to read or write, and how her grandmother would document the lives of her family members that she knew would otherwise be erased because they were not able to contribute to and create their own written works. And so this manifested in her keeping the family Bible for over 4 generations, keeping every single sports trophy since the 1960s, scrapbooks and photographs, preserving and writing down family recipes. Tiara Tanksley writes about her grandmother kind of showing her written recipe cards that her mother did not have written down, but by teaching her daughter how to make the recipe, her daughter was then able to record it and write it down and preserve it that way. And one of the other ways, pictured here, laser pointer's not really working, but is a quilt. And so Tanksley's grandmother has a quilt that contains images of family churches, graveyards, schoolhouses, and like houses where her family lived, and portraits of family members. And so again, this may not be a written record, a written city directory that's stored in a library. This is an archive in itself of her family's history, done through the works of preserving it in the quilt. So I wanted to also talk about some specific case studies of Black women who have created their own libraries that are now accessible to all. Thank you. So I showed you a quote earlier from Dorothy Porter, who again was the librarian at Howard University. She pretty much built the Moreland-Spingarn Research Center from the ground up, which is now one of the world's leading repositories for Black history and culture. She's kind of considered kind of one of the front runners in the field of Black studies because of her kind of contributions to categorizing and formulating Black history and Black materials in a way that are accessible for other scholars. And she was kind of the first person to realize how messed up the Dewey Decimal System was and how maybe we shouldn't be organizing libraries in this way if it's going to misrepresent like an entire group of people. And so she ended up developing her own ways of organizing the materials outside of the Dewey Decimal System. And then more modern examples, I have Delphina's library. It started by Delphina Yawan, who heard about the death of Black Lives Matter activists and started turning to works by like womanist writers and Black feminist writers for comfort. And then she sort of realized that these materials were kind of not accessible on a wider scale, and how the reason she had bought a print copy of these books and she was able to read it that way, but not everyone has necessarily access to these physical copies of books. And so she sort of started this free online library that's got thousands of articles and books and documents written by Black female scholars to kind of make it more accessible. And I have the quote here that she has on her website about how the reason she did it is to kind of create, she says, we never have to experience painful first alone. There's safety in those words, there's a home in their words, and that by preserving and making this information accessible, she's kind of paving the way for future Black women to continue to find comfort in these words. And then I also want to talk about the Black Lesbian Archives, which was started by Prue Mikado, who it is, the full title of it is the Archive for Black Lesbian Grassroots Collectives that existed from the 70s to 90s. And she kind of started it because she felt that there was a huge lack of representation of Black lesbians anywhere. And the way it works is that it's online and it's open for everyone to contribute or read from. And it's sort of by making it this community space, like everyone's contributing, everyone's able to access it. It's building this like greater network of information storage and preservation of Black lesbians who are often doubly excluded by both homophobia and racism and sexism. And so she is kind of preserving materials that are not commonly preserved, based, and it's doing so on the internet. And so my conclusions and takeaways is that Black women are not invited into traditional libraries, they create their own. But also, Black women do exist in libraries and archives. We just need to rethink what we consider a library to be. Thank you.
Thank you so much to all of our speakers, Aria and Cassie, Chandler, and Elise. Can we give it up for them one more time? The theme for our symposium is a journey through time, and this was day one, all about revaluating the past. Come back on Thursday, same time, for a day all about claiming the present moment, and next Tuesday, same time, for projecting the future. Thank you so much for coming.
Woo!
Oh my God, that is so good.
Give it up for yourselves, everybody.
I hope y'all are celebrating yourselves like big time. This is such a and everybody